So unless you want to become personally responsible for digging the Treasury out of the enormous mess it's got itself into, I suggest you are a little bit circumspect about giving yourself sort of bonus shares to rebalance the equity in your company. There's some really simple ways of getting around. Those two founders, they could have got around it very easily. They could have split their £1 shares into 100 penny shares and then issued the investor with 20 penny shares. They could have issued him with a preference share where there's a better argument to be had, or they could have just sorted it out a few weeks in advance of the investment coming in and dressed it up a bit better. I'm not saying it always happens that the Inland Revenue will take that view, but you just don't want to give them the argument. So that's that point.
In essence, they should take advice to structure it.
I think that's my point. Take advice from a lawyer or an accountant or a lawyer. Go ahead.
Can I just throw a spanner in the works? What if you issue employees debt?
Sorry, what if you
issue them debt? So someone is paid under market rate, but you say, when I get funding, I will make up the amount owing to you, basically.
Well, first of all, you have a party because you found an employee who will work for Dare. Sorry?
I know several. When people are starting a company and there's no money, they will lend the company their own money.
Yeah, look, I think basically what you can, it's deferred salary at the end of the day. It's all it is deferred salary. It's like, you're a founder, you can't afford to pay yourself, but you rack it up on the P&L that you're owed that money. It basically comes to, the Inland Revenue only expect to collect their tax, and we've got an accountant in the corner who can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Inland Revenue only expect to get paid their chunk once you get paid. So if the money never gets paid to the employee, it's simply a book entry. So there's no tax to pay until the debt is satisfied. That's basically it.
I just wanted to ask a question there on that. Say the employee lends money to the company, and then later gets a share issue. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's the founders spending their own money and then they get debt.
And they get share. They get debt in the company, which they then convert into equity. Is what you're? Yeah, right. Well, I think the point there is basically the same. Debt equates to cash. So the key there will be when you do the switch into equity. So you're assuming that it's worth. They would switch it into equity when it's worth more than at the beginning, when it's worth nothing, right? Then you will be faced with the same problem that Dan is talking about.
If you create debt for the salary, then you have to pay PAYE and NIC.
At the time you create
because
it.
you're creating a debt.
Right. Well,
So
there we
you
go.
don't create a debt until such time you're ready to issue shares or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So it's better to
As
lend
long
the
as
company cash.
if it's an
rather-
employee,
How's that
minimum
enforced?
wage has to be paid. Otherwise you get caught with the national minimum wage.
Anyone else?
Yes, slightly different. What happens if you have someone who works for you for free on the promise of a split in the revenue of a product in the future?
Well, these arrangements go on all the time. Okay. Technically, no one should be working for somebody for nothing, for a company for nothing, under the National Minimum Wage Act.
Right.
Between you and me, it happens, doesn't it? Let's get real about what goes on in the real world, and people make that decision the whole time. There's obviously, if HMRC looked into it, they would say, first of all, you should be paying the national minimum wage, then you should be paying tax on that amount, and so on and so on. But ultimately, I've not heard of investors or VCs sort of flagging that up as a massive issue when they come to funding, that, oh my God, the directors haven't taken their salary every month, or whatever. People understand how businesses are run. And I'm sure at the moment there are an awful lot of business owners who are not withdrawing any money out of their companies, regardless of what that legislation said. And let's face it, that legislation was not enacted to protect business owners. It was enacted to protect employees. The fact that you might be an employee of your own business is sort of incidental.
But surely it must be extraordinarily common in startups that either yourself or friends or people you meet
happily do work for free, on the promise that they'll not get paid for the work that they've done for free, but that they really want to be involved in something that they quite like, and so, you know, it must have.
Absolutely, and a lot of enterprises evolve from being a project amongst friends to being a commercial entity. I mean, all we can sort of really, we can obviously say what we see, and we can tell you what the law says, and there's obviously a bit of a disconnect occasionally, where you get into large numbers and tax becomes a problem, and you're talking about racking up debt and then converting it to equity and so on. These issues do need, we're flagging them because these issues need to be thought about where the numbers get interesting. But let's face it, a lot of those businesses, they start and then they fail, and sometimes no one's even incorporated a company, and they just sort of disappear. But there's obviously a real world model of how business is done, and we don't want to say never do business like that, because otherwise nobody would ever get anything off the ground. You've got to be realists about it. But the purpose of Bootlaw is to say be realistic, but it's also to say if you want to know what the law is, that's what it says.
But I mean, I've got I didn't come for this reason, but now as I simplified, I've found that I've screwed up completely. But I've got someone that really wants to work for me for free, because they really love kind of what's happening and they just want to be involved in the future. They don't want to be paid for it, and so I'm thinking I don't really know what I should be doing about that.
But are they really an employee?
I don't know. Are they?
Are they your partners in business?
Pardon?
Are they your partners?
No. They're just someone that you kind of meet, and they say it sounds great. Can I kind of? I'd like to be involved, and I appreciate I can't be paid, but maybe in a few months' time.
I think there's something that will sort of steam in to help a little bit is that you've got to look at whether somebody actually is an employee. So if you've got somebody who basically rolls and says I'd love to help you out and helps you out a few days a week, I mean, you're hardly in the position, are you, to say you've got to be here between here and there.
No,
you've got to do this, you've got to do that, you've got to do the other. They will be in control of their own destiny. They clearly are taking a huge amount of economic risk. So I think that pushes them, in my view, them out of an employee category and more into a sort of contractor category where they're sort of providing services to you in that capacity. I mean, what all this is driving at, what this is really driving at, the norm is, for the minimum wage stuff, is people stacking shelves in supermarkets. That's what they're trying to help, isn't it? So I think it's not, and Danvers' point on the shares is trying to look at where the real issue is rather than some of this peripheral stuff. I just think nobody's going to be that interested in. I mean, the revenue's only going to be interested in stuff if there's money around, right? So if there's no money around, then how are they going to pursue it? There's nothing to get.
So you're kind of saying that as well as if people help you out and do all the things we kind of talked about, they still also have to fulfil the criteria you gave for an employee, because if they don't, then they don't actually come under this whole.
What I'm saying is I think the intern thing, I think just look on it in the sense, there's this great new website, which I think is excellent, the internships website, where, people regularly want to have interns in their business because they're the sort of business where people want to go and get work experience. Great. And you can get them to fulfill, you can have 3 at a time, and you're doing them a favour, they're doing you a favour. It's a great sort of mutual benefit thing going on. And you're putting ads out there and so on. I'm just saying, in that situation, you've just got to be a little bit circumspect. You're a funded company, you've got money. Well, why aren't you paying your employees? Somebody might come along, Like I say, the uncle who's a lawyer might say, why is my nephew, been there for 6 weeks and not all his summer holidays and not been paid a penny? You want to avoid that situation. It's not to protect. I don't think it really applies to the developer that who is doing a whole load of freelance stuff, and on the side he'd like to help with your project. It's just sort of the kind of, I'm just trying to help you guys protect yourselves from the real dangers that might lurk out there. And I wouldn't put the intern danger too high. And I hope I haven't. It's not there to scare you. It's there to sort of just say this is just some ground rules. More questions.
Sounds like